The Sterling family's monthly meetings were always an exercise in psychological warfare, but this one promised to be particularly brutal. I sat in my usual corner of the massive penthouse living room, watching my siblings compete for who could flaunt their wealth most obviously. Just closed on another vacation home in Aspen, my older brother Marcus announced, adjusting his Rolex. Right next to the Kardashians' place. My sister Vanessa rolled her eyes, her diamond earrings catching the light. Please. Everyone knows Aspen is passé. Thomas and I just bought a villa in St. Tropez. The neighbors are actual royalty. I sipped my water, hiding my smile behind the glass. If they only knew about the real estate empire I'd built right under their noses. Diana. My mother's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. Are you even listening? Marcus asked about your living situation. Here we go. The reason for today's special meeting. What about it? I asked calmly. Well, Marcus leaned forward, fake concern plastered across his face. We couldn't help but notice you're still renting that tiny apartment in Brooklyn. In that old building on Monroe Street. The Monroe Street building. My first major acquisition, though they didn't know that. To them, I was just a tenant in the pre-war building I actually owned through my company Phoenix Properties. I like my apartment, I said simply. Vanessa let out an exaggerated sigh. Darling, you're 32. Don't you think it's time to grow up? Buy some real property. I thought about my real estate portfolio. Over $2 billion in assets, including the luxury high-rise where this very meeting was taking place. Sterling Tower, pride of the family, named after our great-grandfather who built it. They had no idea that 6 months ago, through a complex series of shell companies, I'd become their landlord. Not everyone has your advantages, Mom said delicately, as if poverty might be contagious. Some of us have to be practical. By advantages, she meant the trust funds my siblings had burned through, the endless bailouts from Dad, the family connections they'd exploited. I'd refused all of it, walking away at 22 with nothing but my real estate license and a dream. I'm doing fine, I assured them. Fine. Marcus scoffed. You can't even afford to buy a house. Meanwhile, I'm closing million-dollar deals left and right. Dad finally looked up from his phone. Now, Marcus. Not everyone has your business acumen. Diana chose her path. My path. They thought I spent my days showing cheap rentals to college students, scraping by on commissions. They had no idea that Diana Sterling, the family disappointment, was actually DS Phoenix, the mysterious real estate mogul who'd been systematically buying up prime Manhattan properties for the past decade. Speaking of business, Vanessa chimed in, have you heard about the Monroe Street situation? Apparently, some developer bought the whole block. They're probably going to tear down that dump Diana lives in. I controlled my expression carefully. The developer was me, and I had no plans to tear down anything. The building was a gem with pre-war details and rent-stabilized units housing families who'd lived there for generations. I was actually in the middle of a historically sensitive renovation. Really? I feigned concern. I hadn't heard. Well, you wouldn't, would you? Marcus smirked. These big real estate deals are a bit out of your league. But don't worry, when you get evicted, you can always move back home. Mom brightened at this idea. Yes. We could help you find a proper job, introduce you to some suitable men. I'm happy with my work, I cut in. And my apartment is fine. Darling, Vanessa reached over to pat my hand condescendingly, you can't spend your whole life being ordinary. The Sterling name used to mean something in this city. It still did, just not the way they thought. DS Phoenix had become legendary in real estate circles, known for acquiring prestigious properties while maintaining their character and protecting long-term tenants. The opposite of my siblings' flashy, destructive development projects. Actually, Dad set down his phone. That's partly why we called this meeting. The board is concerned about the new owner of Sterling Tower. But here it was. What do you mean? I asked innocently. Some company called Phoenix Properties bought a controlling interest 6 months ago, he explained. Very mysterious. No one seems to know who's behind it. Probably some foreign investor, Marcus declared confidently. These overseas billionaires love trophy properties. If they only knew that their mysterious foreign billionaire was sitting right here in Target jeans and a 10-year-old sweater. The thing is, Dad continued, they're raising questions about some of our creative accounting practices. Creative accounting. Like the way Marcus embezzled from the maintenance fund to pay for his Aspen house. Or how Vanessa had been charging her shopping sprees as building improvements. I'm sure it's nothing serious, Mom said quickly. The Sterling name still carries weight. Once we explain. That's just it, Dad interrupted. This Phoenix person doesn't seem impressed by names. They're demanding a full audit. I watched my siblings exchange nervous glances. An audit would reveal all sorts of interesting activities. Maybe Diana could help, Vanessa suggested suddenly. She knows the building works in real estate. Maybe she could talk to the management company? They all turned to look at me with newfound interest. Amazing how quickly I went from embarrassment to potential resource. I don't really handle large commercial properties, I demurred. My work is more modest. God, you're useless, Marcus exploded. Can't even help your own family. No wonder you can't afford a down payment. Mom shot him a quelling look, but I caught her slight nod of agreement. Even Dad, who occasionally showed glimmers of guilt about how they treated me, just returned to his phone. Little did they know I was about to help them, just not in the way they expected. Tomorrow morning, Phoenix Properties would announce its first major policy changes for Sterling Tower. No more creative accounting. No more nepotistic contracts. No more using the building's resources as a family piggy bank. I glanced around the luxury penthouse, taking in the artwork bought with maintenance funds, the furniture charged to the building's account, the designer fixtures that somehow cost 3 times market rate when Vanessa's husband's company installed them. Yes, tomorrow would be very interesting indeed. Well, I stood up, smoothing my old jeans. I should get going. Some of us have to work early tomorrow. Of course, Vanessa smirked. Those rent-controlled apartments won't show themselves. I picked up my battered messenger bag. The one containing documents worth more than everything my siblings owned combined. Oh, Diana, Mom called as I reached the door. Next time, do try to dress more appropriately for a family meeting. Appearances matter. I smiled, thinking of the designer outfit already laid out for tomorrow's board meeting. Don't worry, Mom. Tomorrow, I promise to dress exactly the way a Sterling should. They had no idea just how appropriate my appearance would be. Because tomorrow they'd finally meet the mysterious DS Phoenix, and realize that the daughter they'd dismissed had become the one person who could destroy them all. The next morning I stood in my real office, the entire top floor of a sleek downtown building, and prepared for the moment I'd been planning for months. My assistant Emma handed me a coffee and a final update. The Sterling Tower board is assembled in the main conference room, she reported. Your family arrived early, trying to butter up the other members. I smiled, picturing their desperate networking. And the audit reports? All printed and distributed. The forensic accountants found even more than we expected. She hesitated. Are you sure you want to do this? Once you reveal yourself. It's time, I said firmly. They need to learn that actions have consequences. I checked my reflection in the window. Gone were the shabby jeans and old sweater. Today I wore a perfectly tailored Chanel suit. Classic, elegant, powerful. The kind of outfit my mother always wanted me to wear, though not quite in the circumstances she'd imagined. The press release about Phoenix Properties' true ownership goes live in 20 minutes, Emma reminded me. Once that hits, there's no going back. I nodded, picking up my briefcase. Sometimes going forward is more important than going back. The Sterling Towers boardroom fell silent as I walked in. My family sat at one end of the long table, looking considerably less polished than usual. Clearly, the news about the audit had disrupted their beauty sleep. Who are you? Marcus demanded. This is a private board meeting. I took my time settling into the chair at the head of the table. I'm DS Phoenix, owner of this building and several others your family has borrowed against. Mom's face went pale. Vanessa's mouth fell open in a most unladylike way. Dad just stared, his usual composure cracking. Diana, he whispered. Hello, Dad. I opened my briefcase and began distributing folders. Shall we discuss the audit findings? This is ridiculous, Marcus sputtered. You can't be Phoenix. You're just what? I asked calmly. The family disappointment? The one who couldn't afford a down payment? The one who lives in that dump on Monroe Street? But, Vanessa's voice shook. But you're poor. You show cheap apartments. You wear Target. I work, I corrected her. And I built something real, not just a facade funded by other people's money. The other board members were watching with fascinated horror as the mighty Sterling family crumbled in real time. These folders, I continued professionally, contain detailed reports of financial irregularities involving Sterling Towers accounts. Marcus, would you like to explain the $2 million in maintenance expenses that somehow funded your Aspen house? He went from red to white so fast I worried he might faint. Or perhaps Vanessa can elaborate on how her husband's company charged triple market rate for basic repairs? You're going to expose your own family? Mom asked incredulously. No, I said quietly. You exposed yourselves. I'm just providing consequences. Dad finally found his voice. Diana, please. We can explain. Save it. I held up my hand. I've watched for years as you treated this building, great-grandfather's legacy, like your personal ATM. While you mocked my cheap apartment, I was building a real estate empire based on integrity and actual value. But why? Vanessa whispered. Why pretend to be poor? I never pretended anything. I lived within my means, worked hard, and invested wisely. You just assumed that because I didn't flaunt wealth, I didn't have any. The Monroe Street building, Marcus said slowly. You really live there? I own it, I corrected him. Along with most of that block. And no, I'm not tearing it down. Some of us actually care about more than just profit. Just then, phones around the table started buzzing. The press release had dropped. Phoenix Properties reveals true identity, one board member read aloud. Diana Sterling, a strange daughter of the Sterling real estate family, announced as owner of billion-dollar portfolio. Mom grabbed her phone, scrolling frantically. $2 billion in assets. Ranked among top developers. Known for ethical business practices and historic preservation. This is going to destroy us, Vanessa moaned. No, I said firmly. This is going to save you from yourselves. Starting today, Sterling Tower operates legitimately. No more creative accounting, no more inflated contracts, no more treating the building's accounts like your trust funds. And if we refuse? Marcus challenged, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. I smiled. Then I'll be happy to share these audit reports with the relevant authorities. I'm sure they'd be very interested in some of these transactions. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What do you want? Dad asked finally. I want you to remember what the Sterling name used to mean, I said, looking each of them in the eye. Great-grandfather built this tower with integrity, not fraud. He created homes and businesses, not just profit centers. I stood up, gathering my papers. You have a choice. Work with me to restore that legacy or find somewhere else to live. I hear there are some lovely rentals in Brooklyn. Diana, wait. Dad's voice stopped me at the door. I was wrong about you. Yes, I agreed simply. You were. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. The press had a field day with the story of the secret billionaire who'd outmaneuvered her own family. Mom had to cancel her country club membership, too humiliated to face her social circle. Vanessa's husband's contracting company went under once the audit details leaked. But some good came from it too. Marcus, faced with actual consequences for the first time in his life, enrolled in business school to learn how to manage property legitimately. Vanessa started volunteering at a homeless shelter, discovering that helping others was more fulfilling than shopping. Dad? He asked to learn the business properly, this time from me. 6 months later, I sat in my Monroe Street apartment. Yes, I kept it, looking over the latest Sterling Tower reports. The building was thriving under honest management. Long-term tenants no longer feared eviction. Small businesses in the retail spaces were growing. A knock at the door interrupted my work. It was Mom, looking oddly subdued in casual clothes. I got your invitation to the holiday party, she said hesitantly. In the Monroe Street building's courtyard? I nodded. Every year, I hosted a celebration for the building's residents, families who'd lived there for generations, artists, small business owners. The real heart of New York. It's not quite your usual style, I said carefully. No, she agreed, looking around my comfortable but modest apartment. But I'm learning that style isn't everything. She picked up a framed photo from my desk. me at my real estate license graduation, young and determined. I never asked why you chose this path. Because I wanted to build something real, I said simply. Not just buy things and show them off. And now you own more than all of us combined, she said with a hint of irony. I control more, I corrected her. But ownership isn't the point. What matters is what you do with it. She nodded slowly. Will you teach me? Not about being rich, I know how to do that. But about building something real? I studied her face, seeing genuine humility there for the first time in my life. Come to the holiday party, I said finally. Meet the families who've lived here for 50 years. Listen to their stories. That's where real value begins. After she left, I walked to my window looking out over the city I'd quietly conquered. Sterling Tower gleamed in the distance, no longer a symbol of family corruption but of redemption. The Monroe Street building hummed with life below me, its pre-war charm preserved for future generations. My phone buzzed with investment opportunities, acquisition offers, meeting requests. DS Phoenix was in high demand these days. But I kept my office hours reasonable, my lifestyle modest, my focus on creating value rather than just wealth. Because sometimes success isn't about proving your worth to others. It's about building something worthwhile despite them. Sometimes the one they mock becomes the one they must answer to. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply becoming exactly who you were meant to be. A week later, at the Monroe Street building's holiday party, I watched my family trying to navigate this new world. Mom chatting with Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd lived here 40 years. Marcus learning about the building's history from Mr. Chin, our oldest resident. Vanessa helping kids decorate cookies at the community table. They were learning slowly that real wealth isn't about what you own. It's about what you build, what you preserve, what you make better. Dad found me by the punch bowl looking thoughtful. You know, he said quietly, your great-grandfather started just like this. Caring about buildings and people, not just profits. I nodded. I know. I found his old journals in the Monroe Street building's basement. He wrote about creating homes, not just properties. We forgot that somewhere along the way, Dad admitted. Got caught up in appearances, in competing with each other. It's not too late to remember, I said, watching the party unfold. That's why I didn't expose everything, why I gave you all a chance to change. He looked at me with new respect. You could have destroyed us. That was never the goal, I smiled. The goal was to build something lasting. Something real. As the evening wound down, I stood in the courtyard, fairy lights twinkling overhead, listening to the mix of languages and laughter that made New York special. My family had finally seen me, really seen me, but more importantly, they were starting to see what mattered. Success isn't just about the buildings you own or the deals you close. It's about the communities you protect, the legacies you preserve, the value you create that lasts beyond yourself. And sometimes the greatest achievement isn't in proving them wrong. It's in showing them a better way to be right.
I stood in front of Yesterday's Treasures, my small antique shop in downtown Boston, watching my family pull up in their luxury cars for our monthly dinner. Even from here, I could see my sister Jessica's designer handbag and my brother Michael's custom-tailored suit. They'd be full of stories about their latest vacations and real estate investments, while wondering aloud why I settled for running a dusty antique store. If only they knew. My name is Olivia Bennett, and I've spent the last 10 years building an empire while my family thought I was failing. That empire just happened to include the luxury apartment building where they all lived. Not that they knew that either. Yet. Oh, Olivia, Jessica called out, picking her way carefully across the sidewalk in her Louboutins. You really should let Michael's company handle your storefront. This whole block looks so shabby. Michael nodded in agreement. The Bennett Group could transform this entire neighborhood. You're sitting on valuable real estate, sis, even if your little shop isn't exactly thriving. I smiled, remembering the development proposal sitting on my desk upstairs, from a shell company that actually owned most of the buildings on this street. My shell company. I like it just the way it is, I said mildly. Should we head up? I made dinner in my apartment. Jessica wrinkled her nose. The one above the shop? Honestly, Olivia, you could afford something better if you'd just sell this place. Even a small condo in our building would be an upgrade. The Bennett Arms, their prestigious address, was actually one of my first major acquisitions. I bought it through Grove Investments, one of my many carefully anonymous holding companies. The family assumed it was owned by some faceless corporation. They had no idea their struggling sister was their landlord. My small apartment above the shop was just for show. My real home was a penthouse in Back Bay, but maintaining appearances had become second nature over the years. We climbed the narrow stairs to my modest 2-bedroom apartment. Jessica immediately started pointing out everything that needed updating, while Michael checked his stock portfolio on his phone. Our parents would arrive soon, fresh from their country club lunch, ready to renew their campaign to convince me to do something meaningful with my life. At least let me help you modernize your inventory system, Michael offered, glancing around at the old receipt books and handwritten ledgers on my desk. Everything's digital now. I bit back a laugh. My actual business records were maintained by a team of top accountants who handled my real estate empire. The books he saw were just props in an elaborate performance. The truth was, yesterday's treasures was more than just an antique shop. It was my cover and my secret weapon. Through it, I'd built a network of wealthy collectors, learned about prime properties before they hit the market, and quietly amassed a portfolio worth hundreds of millions. 10 years ago, when I announced I was using my inheritance to buy this shop instead of joining the family real estate business, they'd been horrified. "You're throwing your life away," Dad had declared. The Bennett name stands for luxury development, not second-hand furniture. But I'd seen something they hadn't. The antique market wasn't just about old furniture. It was about connections, about understanding value that others missed. Every wealthy collector who walked through my door became a potential source of investment opportunities. The doorbell rang, Mom and Dad arriving right on schedule. I could already predict the conversation. Subtle digs about my modest lifestyle, hints about available positions at Bennett Group, concerned questions about my future. "Darling," Mom air-kissed my cheeks. "We just had lunch with the Harrismans. Their daughter started her own interior design firm, very successful. Perhaps you two should talk." "I'm happy with my shop, Mom." "But you could be so much more," Dad interjected. The Bennett name opens doors. Look at your siblings. Michael's development company is transforming the city, and Jessica's luxury boutiques are in all the right neighborhoods. Yes, look at my siblings. Michael's transforming developments were actually struggling to maintain occupancy, and Jessica's boutiques were staying afloat mainly because I anonymously purchased their buildings and charged below market rent. Not that anyone knew that. "How's the apartment hunt going?" I asked innocently, serving dinner. "I heard rents are going up at the Bennett Arms." Michael groaned. "Don't remind me. Some faceless corporation bought it last year, and they're reviewing all the special arrangements. I might lose my friends and family discount on the penthouse." I hid my smile behind my wine glass. That review was actually my doing. It was time to start bringing rents up to market rate, even for family. Especially for family. "At least you have a penthouse," Jessica sighed. "I had to settle for a mere 3-bedroom on the 15th floor." Mom patted my hand. "Someday, dear, if you make some changes, you might be able to afford to live somewhere nice too." If they only knew that I owned not just their building, but half the luxury properties in their precious neighborhood. The faceless corporation they complained about was just one piece of my carefully constructed business empire. It had started small. The antique shop really had been just a shop at first. But I'd learned quickly that my wealthy clients weren't just buying furniture. They were looking for investments, for opportunities. They talked freely around me, the seemingly harmless antique dealer, about properties they were selling, deals they were making. I used that information, combined with my inheritance and a talent for spotting undervalued assets, to start buying properties through shell companies. Each success led to larger opportunities. While my family focused on flashy developments and high-end retail, I quietly acquired stable, profitable buildings in prime locations. The conversation turned, as it always did, to family pride. "The Bennett name means something in this city," Dad reminded me. "Your great-grandfather built this family's reputation in real estate, and here you are, hiding in a dusty shop instead of building on his legacy." I thought about the documents in my office safe, proof that I owned more prime Boston real estate than the Bennett Group ever had. My great-grandfather would have understood. He'd started as a furniture maker before moving into property development. He knew the value of seeing potential where others didn't. "Speaking of real estate," Michael said, checking his phone again. "My company is bidding on the Marlborough Street project. Prime location, luxury condos. Should be announcing the winner next week. I nodded sympathetically, knowing he'd already lost that bid. One of my companies had secured it yesterday, well under market value. Michael's obvious play for the property had actually driven other developers away, letting me slip in quietly through back channels. To success, Jessica raised her glass. And to family. To family, everyone echoed. They looked at me expectantly. To seeing value where others don't, I offered. They exchanged knowing looks, poor Olivia still clinging to her little shop philosophy. But I wasn't talking about antiques. I was talking about the entire game of wealth and power they thought they understood. After dinner, as they prepared to leave, Michael made one last attempt. The offer still stands, sis. Bennett Group could use someone with your eye for unique items, even if it's just consulting. Thanks, but I like being independent. Independent is one thing, Jessica said, but don't you want more? Look at this place. The shabby furniture, the outdated kitchen. Don't you want to live like a real Bennett? I looked around my carefully crafted facade, the deliberately modest apartment above a seemingly struggling antique shop. Everything designed to make them underestimate me, to keep them from looking too closely at what I was really building. I'm exactly where I want to be, I said truthfully. They left in their expensive cars, heading back to their luxury apartments in my building, never suspecting that their failing sister was about to turn their world upside down. Because tomorrow, everything would change. The faceless corporation that owned their precious Bennett Arms was about to have a very familiar face. And that was just the beginning. I walked down to my shop after they left, running my hands over the genuinely valuable antiques that decorated the space. Each piece had a story, just like each property in my portfolio had a story. The difference was, I understood the true value of both. My phone buzzed, an alert about another property acquisition, this one right next door to Michael's latest development. Soon, very soon, the family would learn that the real Bennett legacy wasn't about flashy developments or luxury boutiques. It was about seeing the truth behind the facade. Just like in the antique business, the real value isn't always obvious at first glance. And I had become very, very good at spotting hidden value. The next morning, I dressed carefully in a designer suit that cost more than Jessica's entire wardrobe, though she'd never know that. 10 years of playing the struggling shopkeeper had taught me the value of appearances. Today, those appearances would finally change. I had scheduled 3 meetings. The first was with the Bennett Group's board of directors, my brother's company. The second was with the management of the Bennett Arms. The third was with my family. Michael was already in the Bennett Group's boardroom when I arrived, frowning at my presence. Olivia, this is a closed meeting. We're discussing the Marlborough Street project. Yes, I interrupted smoothly. That's why I'm here. Grove Investments would like to discuss terms. The color drained from his face. Grove Investments, but they're the ones who won the bid. I finished, setting my briefcase on the table. I know. One of the board members cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Ms. Bennett, but we're meeting with Grove's CEO today. Mr. Harrison should be here any moment. I smiled, taking the seat at the head of the table. Mr. Harrison doesn't exist. I am Grove Investments, along with Riverside Properties, Summit Development, and about a dozen other companies you've been competing with for the past decade. The silence was absolute. Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's impossible, he finally managed. You run an antique shop. I run several businesses, I corrected him. The antique shop is just the most visible one. Would you like to see the paperwork? I spent the next hour laying out exactly how much of Boston's prime real estate I controlled. By the end, Michael had loosened his tie and was gulping water like a man in the desert. Why? He asked finally. Why hide all this? Because you and the family never would have let me build it my way. You would have insisted I do things the Bennett way, flashy developments over leveraged properties, style over substance. He flinched, knowing I was right. Now, I continued about the Marlborough Street project. I'm willing to work out a joint venture agreement, but on my terms. The second meeting at the Bennett Arms was even more interesting. Jessica was there, arguing with the building manager about her rent increase. But we've always had special rates, she was saying as I walked in. Daddy arranged it with the old owners. The new owner is restructuring all our arrangements, the manager explained. He saw me and straightened up. "Oh, Ms. Bennett, I didn't realize you were coming yourself." Jessica spun around. "Olivia? What are you doing here?" "Meeting with my management team," I said calmly. "We need to discuss the building's new direction." "Your what?" The manager looked confused. "Ms. Bennett is the owner of the building. Has been for about a year now." Jessica grabbed the desk for support. "That's not possible. Grove Investments owns the Bennett Arms, some big corporation." "I am Grove Investments," I said for the second time that day, among other things. But you live above a shop, in a tiny apartment, with outdated appliances." "That's my office apartment. I actually live in the penthouse at the Riverside Tower." I paused. "Which I also own." She sank into a chair, her designer dress crumpling. "Does Michael know?" "He just found out. The family meeting this evening should be interesting." The final meeting was set for my real apartment, the penthouse that took up the top 2 floors of the Riverside Tower. I'd never brought my family here before. They didn't even know this building existed, despite it being one of the most exclusive addresses in Boston. They arrived together: Mom, Dad, Michael, and Jessica. Their faces were a mix of shock, confusion, and dawning realization as the private elevator opened directly into my home. "Welcome to my actual residence," I said, greeting them in the marble-floored entryway. "We have a lot to discuss." Dad found his voice first. "Michael told us. But I didn't believe." "How long?" 10 years, I said, leading them to the living room with its panoramic city views. "Since the day you all thought I was throwing my life away on an antique shop." "But why pretend?" Mom asked. "Why let us think you were struggling?" I gestured to the city spread out below us. "Look out there. Every luxury building you can see, I own at least part of it. Not through flashy deals or family connections, but through careful, quiet acquisitions." Would that have been possible if everyone knew a Bennett was behind it? They knew I was right. Our family name attracted attention, drove up prices, created expectations. The antique shop was your cover, Jessica realized. All those wealthy clients were also property owners, developers, investors. Amazing what people will discuss around someone they think is just a simple shopkeeper. Michael was staring at a scale model of the city on my desk, with certain buildings highlighted. "This is your portfolio. It's bigger than Bennett Group's." 4 times bigger, I confirmed. More stable too. No overleveraged properties, no risky developments. Just solid, profitable buildings in prime locations. "And now?" Dad asked quietly. "Why reveal everything now?" I sat down, gesturing for them to do the same. "Because it's time for phase 2. I'm consolidating my holdings under a new company. One that will transform Boston's real estate market. But to do it right, I need to work with family, not against them." "What are you proposing?" Michael leaned forward. "A merger. Bennett Group's local reputation and connections, combined with my portfolio and capital." But I held up a hand as Dad started to speak. "On my terms. No more flashy projects that barely break even. No more trading on the family name instead of doing proper research." "You want to take over the family business," Jessica said. "I want to save it," I corrected her. "Michael, your company is overleveraged. Jessica, your boutiques are only surviving because I've been subsidizing your rent. Mom, Dad, that country club membership you're so proud of? I bought the club last year." They sat in stunned silence, looking around my penthouse with new eyes. Everything they thought they knew about me, about success, about the family legacy, was being rewritten. "The antique business taught me something valuable," I continued. "True worth isn't always obvious. Sometimes the dusty piece in the corner is worth more than the shiny new item on display." I applied that lesson to real estate. "And we never saw it," Mom said softly. "We were so busy feeling sorry for you." "While I was quietly building an empire," I finished. "Yes. The question is, what do we do now?" Michael set down the property portfolio he'd been studying. "We accept your offer. All of us, right?" One by one, they nodded. Even Dad, who had always insisted he knew best about business, could see the wisdom of my approach. "Good," I smiled. "Now, about your rent increases." Jessica actually laughed. "Our little sister owns our homes." "When did you get so devious?" "I'm not devious," I corrected her. "I'm strategic. There's a difference." Later that night, after they left, I stood at my window looking out at my city. The lights of the buildings I owned twinkled back at me, The Bennett Arms, the Riverside properties, all of them representing a decade of careful planning. My phone buzzed with messages from my family. Apologies, congratulations, requests for meetings to discuss the future. I answered each one professionally, but I couldn't help smiling. The game of hide and seek was finally over. Tomorrow, I would begin transitioning my companies out of the shadows. The faceless corporations would get my name and face. The real estate world would learn that the biggest player in Boston had been hiding in plain sight in a small antique shop downtown. But tonight, I had one more stop to make. I drove to yesterday's treasures, letting myself in quietly. The shop that had been my cover for so long was still one of my favorite places. Among the antiques and artifacts, I'd learned my most valuable lesson. Sometimes the best way to build something extraordinary is to let everyone think you're ordinary. I picked up a small, dusty clock from a back shelf. A genuine 18th century piece worth more than a new BMW. Tomorrow, I would add it to my penthouse collection. Like me, it had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone who could see its true value. My family had finally learned to look past appearances. They discovered that success doesn't always wear designer labels or drive luxury cars. Sometimes it runs a small antique shop and quietly builds an empire while nobody's watching. And sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right so completely that they have no choice but to admit they never really saw you at all. I never thought I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office at 29, staring at adoption papers that my parents had kept hidden from me my entire life. But here I was, watching my whole world unravel because I refused to give my house to my younger sister Emma. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just 6 months ago, I had been celebrating. After years of hard work and saving every penny from my job as a software developer, I'd finally bought my dream home. A beautiful 3-bedroom craftsman with a wraparound porch in a quiet neighborhood. The kind of house I'd imagined raising a family in someday. "You did it, sweetie," Mom had gushed during the housewarming party, hugging me tight. "We're so proud of you, Sarah." Dad had even teared up a little as he helped me arrange furniture, telling me how impressed he was that I'd managed to save for the down payment all on my own. For once, I felt like I was the star child, not Emma. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. But growing up, she was always the golden child. The pretty one, the popular one, the one who could do no wrong. While I buried myself in books and coding, Emma was winning beauty pageants and dating the football captain. My achievements were acknowledged with quiet nods, while hers were celebrated with parties and endless praise. Emma's face darkened. "That's complicated. Jason and his parents aren't exactly speaking right now." That should have been my first warning sign, but I was too angry to notice it then. "Well, this isn't complicated at all," I said, standing up. "The answer is no, I'm not giving you my house." "Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell," Mom's voice cracked like a whip. "Sit down right now. We're not finished discussing this." "Yes, we are," I replied, grabbing my purse. "The house is mine. I bought it. I pay the mortgage. End of discussion." I walked out to a chorus of protests and guilt trips, Emma's theatrical sobs following me down the driveway. The next few weeks were hell. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members, all urging me to do the right thing and think of the babies. Emma posted tearful updates on social media about how hard it was to prepare for twins while living in a tiny apartment, complete with pointed comments about selfish people who wouldn't help family in need. Mom and Dad alternated between guilt-tripping and bribery. "We'll help you with a down payment on a new place," Dad offered during one of his unannounced visits to my office. Still, we managed to maintain a decent relationship. That is, until she showed up at our weekly family dinner 3 months ago, dramatically announcing she was pregnant with twins. "Oh my God, twins!" Mom had squealed, rushing to hug her. "This is wonderful news. My baby girl is having babies," Dad beamed, already pulling out his phone to start calling relatives. I smiled and congratulated her, of course. But something felt off about the way Emma kept glancing at me throughout dinner. A calculating look in her eyes that I'd seen before, usually right before she asked to borrow something she never intended to return. The other shoe dropped during dessert. "So," Emma said, pushing her chocolate cake around her plate, "Jason and I have been talking about where we're going to live once the babies come." Mom and Dad exchanged knowing looks that made my stomach clench. Our apartment is way too small for twins, Emma continued, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I knew too well. We need somewhere bigger, with a yard for the kids to play in. She trailed off meaningfully, looking directly at me. The silence stretched until I couldn't take it anymore. What exactly are you suggesting, Emma? Well, she smiled sweetly, resting her hand on her still flat stomach. Your house would be perfect. It has plenty of room, that beautiful yard, and you're just one person. You don't really need all that space. I nearly choked on my coffee. Excuse me? Now, Sarah, Mom jumped in, using her mediator voice. Think about it logically. Emma's starting a family. She needs the space more than you do. You could easily move back into an apartment. Or move back home. Dad added enthusiastically. We could convert your old room back from Mom's craft space. It would be just like old times. I looked around the table, wondering if I'd somehow slipped into an alternate reality where this conversation made sense. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want me to give up the house I spent years saving for, the house I just bought 3 months ago, because Emma got pregnant? Don't be selfish, Sarah, Emma sniffed, tears welling up in her eyes. These are your nieces or nephews we're talking about. Don't you want them to have the best possible start in life? What about Jason's parents' house? I countered. They have that huge place in the suburbs and are talking about downsizing. Your sister's hormones are making her so emotional, Mom pleaded during her daily calls. She cries herself to sleep worrying about where her babies will live. I held firm, but the pressure was wearing me down. Then came the dinner invitation that changed everything. We need to have a family meeting, Dad said over the phone, his voice unusually serious. There's something important we need to discuss. I should have known something was wrong when I arrived and Emma wasn't there. Mom and Dad sat me down in the living room, their faces grave. There's something we need to tell you, Mom began, clutching Dad's hand. Something we should have told you long ago. Dad reached for a manila envelope on the coffee table. You need to understand why helping Emma is so important. My heart started pounding as he pulled out a stack of official-looking papers. The letterhead read, Happy Hearts Adoption Agency. You're adopted, Sarah, Mom said softly. We adopted you when you were 6 months old. The world tilted sideways. I stared at the papers, my name, my original name, jumping out at me, Sarah Elizabeth Cooper. Emma is our biological daughter, Dad continued, his voice gentle but firm. Which means those twins she's carrying are our only biological grandchildren. The implications hit me like a physical blow. All those years of feeling like an outsider, of never quite measuring up to Emma, they suddenly made horrible sense. We love you just as much, Mom rushed to add, reaching for my hand. But surely you can understand now why this is different. Why Emma's babies need to be our priority. I yanked my hand away, bile rising in my throat. So that's it? That's why you've been pushing so hard for me to give up my house? Because I'm not your real daughter? Don't say it like that, Dad frowned. We're telling you this because you need to understand the bigger picture. Family is about blood. Family is about blood. I cut him off, laughing bitterly. Then I guess I've never really been part of this family, have I? I stood up, my legs shaking. Thank you for finally being honest with me. It explains so much about the last 29 years. Sarah, wait. Mom called after me as I headed for the door. We can talk about this. We can figure something out together. I paused in the doorway, turning back to look at the people I thought were my parents. You know what's funny? I already knew I was adopted. Their shocked faces gave me a grim satisfaction. I did one of those DNA ancestry tests last year, I continued. Was curious about my medical history, found out I'm mostly Swedish and Scottish, which seemed odd given our supposed Italian heritage. I pulled out my phone, holding up the DNA results I kept screenshots of. I waited for months for you to tell me the truth, kept giving you chances to be honest with me. But you never did. You only told me now because you're trying to manipulate me into giving up my house. It's not like that, Dad protested weakly. It's exactly like that, I replied. And you know what else is interesting about DNA tests? They can tell you if you have any biological relatives who've also taken the test. Mom's face went pale. What do you mean? I mean I found my birth mother, I said quietly. Her name is Catherine Cooper. She lives in Oregon. We've been talking for months. She told me everything. How young she was when she had me. how she wanted to keep me but couldn't afford to, how she made sure to pick parents who promised to love me as their own. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Guess she should have been more careful with her screening process. We did love you as our own. Mom cried, tears streaming down her face. No, I corrected her. You love me as your adopted daughter. There's clearly a difference. I walked out, ignoring their calls for me to come back. As I drove home, my phone started buzzing with messages. First from Mom and Dad, then from Emma. They must have called her right away. I blocked them all. That night, I sat on my wraparound porch, my porch, that I had worked for and earned, and made a call to Oregon. Catherine, it's Sarah. Remember how you said you'd love to come visit sometime? How do you feel about coming for an extended stay? There are some people here I think you should meet. Catherine arrived on a sunny Tuesday morning, wheeling a small suitcase up my front walk. I'd seen her photos, of course, but nothing prepared me for the surreal moment of looking into eyes that matched my own exactly. Sarah, she breathed, reaching out to touch my face with trembling fingers. You look just like I did at your age. We stood there for a long moment, both fighting back tears, before I pulled her into a fierce hug. It felt like coming home in a way that no hug from my adoptive mother ever had. The next few days were a blur of long conversations, shared memories, and piecing together our separate histories. Catherine showed me photos of herself at 19, scared and alone but determined to make the best choice for her baby. I showed her pictures from my childhood, and her eyes darkened at how often I was standing slightly apart from the rest of the family, even in supposed moments of celebration. They promised me they'd love you like their own, she said quietly, tracing a finger over a photo of my high school graduation. I made them promise over and over. They did love me, I replied, surprising myself by defending them. Just differently. I always felt it, but I couldn't explain why until now. Catherine was helping me make dinner when the first text from Emma arrived. I unblocked everyone's numbers, curious to see what they'd do next. I can't believe you're being so cruel, the message read. Mom and Dad are devastated. After everything they did for you, this is how you repay them. By bringing your real mother here to hurt them. I showed the message to Catherine, who raised an eyebrow. Charming girl, your sister. Just wait, I said grimly. It gets better. Sure enough, the next day brought a series of increasingly dramatic messages from Emma about her difficult pregnancy, the stress I was causing her, and how she was having complications that were all my fault. Mom and Dad joined in, sending long paragraphs about family loyalty and how they couldn't believe I was betraying them like this. Then came the social media posts. Emma shared ultrasound photos with captions about toxic family members causing her stress. Mom posted old family photos with lengthy captions about the daughter we chose and how heartbroken they were that I'd rejected them. I stayed silent, letting them dig themselves deeper. Are you sure about this? Catherine asked one evening, watching me document and screenshot every message, every post, every manipulative attempt. You don't have to expose them. Yes, I do, I replied, thinking of all the years I'd spent feeling like I wasn't quite good enough. Not just for me, but for any other adopted children they might try to manipulate in the future. The catalyst came 3 days later when Emma showed up at my door unannounced, her belly noticeably larger than the last time I'd seen her. We need to talk, she demanded, barging past me into the foyer. This has gone on long enough. She stopped short when she saw Catherine sitting calmly at my kitchen table, sipping tea. You must be Emma, Catherine said pleasantly. I've heard so much about you. Emma's face went red. This is a family matter. It doesn't concern you. Actually, I interjected, as my birth mother, I'd say it concerns her quite a bit, especially since our current family drama centers around biological connections. That's different. Emma snapped. Mom and Dad raised you. They gave you everything. And now you're throwing it all back in their faces because what? They finally told you the truth about what you are. What I am, I repeated softly. And what exactly am I, Emma? She faltered slightly, perhaps realizing she'd said too much. You know what I mean. You're adopted. Which means these babies, she gestured to her stomach, are Mom and Dad's only real grandchildren. They're actual blood family. That's why they need to grow up in this house. Interesting logic, I mused. Tell me, does Jason's family know you're pregnant? Emma went very still. What? His parents, I clarified. The ones you said you weren't speaking to. Do they know they're going to be grandparents? Of course they do, Emma stammered, but her hand twitched nervously. That's odd, I said, pulling out my phone. Because I had a very interesting conversation with Jason's mother yesterday. The color drained from Emma's face. You see, after you all revealed my adoption status, I got curious about family connections, did some dating. Found out Jason's parents lived just 20 minutes away. Lovely people, by the way. Margaret was particularly interested to hear about her son's impending fatherhood, especially since she hadn't seen or heard from him in almost a year. You had no right, Emma whispered. No right? I laughed. You tried to force me out of my house by using my adoption status against me, and you want to talk about rights. The babies are Jason's, Emma protested, but her voice was weak. Are they? I asked quietly, because Margaret mentioned that Jason had a vasectomy 3 years ago. Said he was absolutely certain he never wanted children. Emma swayed slightly, grabbing the wall for support. So either these babies are a medical miracle, I continued, or you're lying about who their father is, which might explain why you're so desperate to get your hands on my house. Because you know the real father won't be providing any support. You don't understand, Emma choked out, tears spilling down her cheeks. I made a mistake. I need help. Mom and Dad can't know. Can't know what? A new voice interrupted. We all turned to see our parents standing in the doorway. In the commotion with Emma, I hadn't heard them come in. Mom, Dad. Emma's hand flew to her stomach protectively. What are you doing here? We came to talk sense into your sister, Dad said, glaring at me, to remind her about real family loyalty. Real family loyalty, I repeated thoughtfully. Like the loyalty of telling the truth about who fathered your grandchildren? Mom stepped forward, her face tight with anger. How dare you question your sister's integrity after everything you've done? Bringing that woman here, she gestured dismissively at Catherine, trying to hurt us with your biological mother. My biological mother, I cut in, who has shown me more honest love in 3 days than you have in 29 years. Who didn't wait until she needed something from me to tell me the truth about my origins. We loved you, Mom cried. We gave you everything. Except honesty. Catherine spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. Accept equality with your biological child. Accept the basic respect of telling her the truth about her own life. You give up your rights when you gave her away, Dad snapped at Catherine. No, Catherine replied calmly. I entrusted my daughter to people who I thought would love her unconditionally, who promised to never make her feel like she was less than their biological child. You're the ones who gave up your rights when you broke that promise. This isn't about ancient history, Emma interrupted desperately. This is about my babies needing a home. Yes, let's talk about your babies, I said. Let's talk about how Jason isn't their father, how you're lying to everyone, including Mom and Dad, about your pregnancy. Emma? Mom's voice was uncertain for the first time. What is she talking about? Emma's composure cracked. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I was seeing this married man. He can't leave his wife. I didn't know what to do. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom sank into another chair, her face ashen. Dad just stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. So let me get this straight, I said into the quiet. You tried to force me out of my house by using my adopted status against me, all to cover up your own lies. You were willing to make me homeless to hide your affair? We didn't know, Mom whispered. Emma, how could you? How could she? I laughed bitterly. The same way you could hide my adoption for 29 years. The same way you could try to manipulate me into giving up my house by suddenly revealing I'm not your real daughter. This family has a pattern of lying to get what they want. I stood up, surveying the broken tableau before me. Emma sobbing in her chair, Mom's shocked face, Dad's defeated posture, and Catherine's quiet, supportive presence beside me. I think it's time for you all to leave, I said firmly. I'll be speaking with my lawyer tomorrow about filing a harassment claim if any of you contact me again. Emma, I suggest you start looking for a place you can actually afford instead of trying to steal mine. Sarah, please, Mom reached for me. We can fix this. No, I said quietly. We can't. You only told me I was adopted because you thought it would help you take my house. That's not something we can fix. What about family? Dad asked weakly. I smiled, reaching for Catherine's hand. I have family, real family, based on love and truth, not blood and manipulation. I think it's time for you all to figure out what those words actually mean. I watched them leave, Emma supported by our parents, all three of them looking small and defeated. As their car pulled away, Catherine squeezed my hand. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I thought about it for a moment. You know what? I really am. For the first time in my life, I feel completely okay. That was 6 months ago. Emma had her twins, 2 healthy girls, and moved in with our parents. I heard through mutual friends that the married man's wife found out, and there was quite a scandal, but I stay far away from the drama. Catherine decided to relocate to be closer to me. She bought a small house just 10 minutes away, and we have dinner together several times a week. Sometimes we talk about the past, about what might have been, but mostly we focus on building our future relationship. Mom still sends the occasional message about reconciliation, about how much they miss me. Dad forwards family photos sometimes, usually with guilt-trippy captions about forgiveness and second chances. I archive them all without responding. Emma named her daughters Sarah and Catherine. I assume as some sort of peace offering or manipulation tactic, but I've never met them. Maybe someday when they're older, I'll tell them the story of how their mother tried to steal my house. Or maybe I'll just let the past stay in the past. Yesterday, I sat on my porch with Catherine, watching the sunset and sharing a bottle of wine. "Do you ever regret finding me?" she asked suddenly, "given everything that happened?" I thought about my comfortable house, my newfound peace, and the honest relationship I now had with my birth mother. "Never," I replied truthfully. "You helped me find something much more valuable than a house." "What's that?" "The strength to stand up for myself. The courage to demand truth instead of comfortable lies." I smiled at her. "A real family." She squeezed my hand, and we sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sometimes I've learned losing a false family is the only way to find your true one. The dinner party was in full swing, crystal glasses clinking as Seattle's elite mingled in my former mother-in-law's mansion. I shouldn't have been there. Technically, I wasn't even invited. But when your company caters the most exclusive events in the city, you sometimes end up in interesting situations. "Olivia, darling." Margaret Wellington's voice cut through the crowd. "You simply must try these divine crab cakes. They're from Milano's, of course. Not like that dreadful catering service my ex-daughter-in-law runs." I kept my focus on arranging the dessert display, fighting back a smile. If Margaret only knew that both the dreadful catering service and her precious Milano's were owned by the same person. Me. My name is Sophia Chen, and 3 years ago, I committed the unforgivable sin of divorcing Margaret's precious son, William. Not because of any scandal or drama, but simply because we'd grown apart. I wanted to build something of my own. He wanted a wife who'd be content hosting charity luncheons and looking pretty at board meetings. What the Wellingtons never knew was that I'd been building my empire long before the divorce. The catering company was just the visible part, my testing ground for new recipes and concepts. Behind the scenes, I'd been quietly acquiring and transforming struggling restaurants across the city. Milano's had been my first major acquisition. I kept the name but completely revamped the menu and operations, turning a failing Italian restaurant into the hottest chain in the Pacific Northwest. Not that anyone knew I owned it. All the paperwork was under my holding company's name. Sophia, Jenny, my assistant, appeared at my elbow. "The kitchen needs you. There's an issue with the soufflés." I nodded, grateful for the excuse to step away from Margaret's voice. In the kitchen, my team worked with practiced efficiency, but I could see the tension in their shoulders. They'd all heard Margaret's comments throughout the night. "Listen up," I said, gathering them around. "I know this isn't easy, but remember, we're not just here to serve food. We're here to prove a point." Maria, my head chef, raised an eyebrow. "Are you finally going to tell her?" "Not yet." I adjusted my chef's coat, but soon, very soon. The truth was, I'd been planning this moment for months. Margaret's campaign to blacklist my catering company from Seattle's social circle had actually done me a favor. It had pushed me to expand faster, think bigger. While she was busy badmouthing my little business, I'd been building a restaurant empire worth over $50 million. My phone buzzed. A text from William. "Saw you in the kitchen. We should talk." I ignored it. William had been trying to talk ever since he found out I'd bought his favorite steakhouse last month. Not that he knew I owned it, he just wanted to complain about the menu changes. Mrs. Wellington is asking for more of the Milano's signature sauce, Jenny reported, returning from the dining room. She's telling everyone it's a secret family recipe that no other restaurant could possibly replicate. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. That sauce was my grandmother's recipe, the same one Margaret had once called too ethnic for her dinner parties. Through the kitchen doors, I could hear her holding court. Really, it's about standards. Some people, she shot a pointed look toward the kitchen, simply don't understand the level of excellence required in our circle. That's why I only trust Milano's for my important events. I checked my watch. In exactly 2 weeks, Margaret would be hosting the annual Wellington Family Foundation Gala, the biggest social event of the season. She'd been bragging about having Milano's cater it for months. What she didn't know was that I had a surprise planned for that night, one that would finally show her exactly who she'd been underestimating all these years. Sophia, Jenny appeared again. The lawyer called. Everything's set for next week's board meeting. I nodded. The pieces were falling into place. Perfect. And the documents I asked for? All here. She handed me a thick folder. Are you sure about this timing? Absolutely. I started reviewing the papers. Margaret Wellington has spent 3 years trying to destroy my reputation in this city. It's time she learned who really runs things around here. The week before the Wellington Gala was a blur of meetings and preparations. I sat in my downtown office, reviewing the final documents for what I was about to do. The view of Puget Sound stretched out before me, gray waves matching my contemplative mood. The board meeting for Milano's is confirmed for tomorrow, Jenny said, setting a coffee on my desk. Margaret Wellington still thinks it's just a routine quarterly review. I smiled, picking up the latest financial reports. Under my ownership, Milano's had grown from 3 struggling locations to 15 thriving restaurants across the Pacific Northwest. And now I was about to merge it with my other holdings, creating one of the largest restaurant groups in the region. My phone buzzed. William again. Mother's frantic about the gala menu. She says no one at Milano's is returning her calls. What's going on, Sophia? I ignored it, just like I'd ignored his last dozen messages. Let him worry. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Chen, your 2 o'clock is here. The Milano's executive team. Send them in. 6 people filed into my office, all looking nervous. They'd been running Milano's day-to-day operations while I remained the silent owner. Only they knew who really signed their paychecks. As you know, I began tomorrow's board meeting will announce some significant changes. I want to make sure we're all clear on how this will play out. I laid out the plan, watching their faces as they realized what was about to happen. The merger would make headlines, especially given who would be affected. Mrs. Wellington, my CFO, said carefully, she'll be there tomorrow? Oh yes. I leaned back in my chair. As a special guest. After all, she's our most vocal supporter. Later that evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into exactly the person I'd been avoiding. William stood by the elevator, his expensive suit a reminder of the life I'd left behind. Sophia, he said, stepping forward. We need to talk. About what, William? How your mother's been trying to destroy my business, or about how you've done nothing to stop her? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Look, you know how mother gets. But these changes at Milano's, they're causing her real distress. She's planned this gala for months, and it will be perfectly catered, I assured him. Just maybe not quite the way she expects. His eyes narrowed. What are you planning? You'll find out tomorrow, along with everyone else. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my power suit, Chanel, black, impeccable. Margaret wasn't the only one who knew how to make an impression. The Milano's boardroom was filled by the time I arrived. Margaret sat near the front, radiating self-importance. She'd been invited as a valued customer to provide feedback on recent changes. She didn't even look at me as I walked in. The chairman stood to begin the meeting. Before we discuss regular business, we have a special announcement. Over the past 3 years, Milano's has undergone significant transformation under new ownership. Today, we're announcing a merger that will create the largest restaurant group in the Pacific Northwest. Margaret perked up, probably already planning how to brag about her connection to such a prestigious company. I'd like to introduce the owner who has guided this transformation, Ms. Sophia Chen. The silence was absolute as I walked to the podium. Margaret's face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally horror. "This is impossible," she sputtered. "She runs a catering company." "Actually," I smiled, "I run several businesses. The catering company, Milano's, and as of today, the new Chen restaurant group, which will include 28 locations across 3 states." I clicked to the next slide, showing the combined revenue figures. Margaret's face had gone pale. "Of course," I continued, "this merger means some changes in how we operate. For instance, we'll be reviewing all our regular client relationships, ensuring they align with our company values." Margaret stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "You planned this? All of it?" "Planned what?" I asked innocently. "To build a successful business. Yes, I did. To watch you praise my restaurants while trying to destroy my catering company? That was just an amusing bonus." The night of the Wellington Gala arrived clear and cold. I stood in the kitchen of the Four Seasons ballroom, watching my team prepare what would be a very special menu. After the board meeting revelation, Margaret had tried desperately to cancel Milano's catering contract for the gala. But ironically, the same ironclad contracts she'd always praised them for now worked against her. Breaking it this late would have meant hefty penalties and, more importantly, social embarrassment. "Everything's ready," Maria announced, putting the finishing touches on the appetizers. "Should we serve them exactly as planned?" I smiled, adjusting my chef's coat. Tonight, instead of hiding in the kitchen, I would be front and center. Exactly as planned. Let's show Seattle what we can really do. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite, all drawn by the Wellington family name. Margaret stood by the entrance, greeting guests with a fixed smile that looked more like a grimace. When she saw me emerge from the kitchen in my pristine chef's coat with Executive Chef, Chen Restaurant Group embroidered in gold, her smile cracked completely. "What are you doing?" she hissed as I approached. "You can't be out here." "Actually, I can. It's in the contract. The executive chef personally oversees all premium events." I gestured to the approaching servers. "Ah, here come the appetizers. I believe you'll recognize them." The servers presented trays of elegantly plated bites, all signature dishes from Milano's, but with subtle twists that elevated them further. "These are Milano's recipes," Margaret protested. "You can't. They're my recipes," I corrected her gently. "Every dish you've praised at Milano's for the past 3 years. They were all mine. That secret family sauce you love so much? My grandmother's recipe." The color drained from her face as guests began sampling the food, exclaiming over the familiar yet enhanced flavors. "Oh, Margaret," one of her society friends called out. "These are even better than usual. Did Milano's get a new chef?" Before Margaret could respond, I stepped forward. "Actually, I'm the chef who's been developing Milano's menu for the past 3 years. Sophia Chen, executive chef and CEO of the Chen Restaurant Group." The woman's eyes widened with recognition. "Chen, weren't you William's wife?" "Yes. Now I'm just the owner of his favorite restaurants." I turned to Margaret. "Would you like me to explain how that spicy crab sauce is made? It's a family recipe after all, just not your family." She opened her mouth to respond but was interrupted by William's arrival. He looked between us, taking in the situation. "Sophia," he said carefully, "could we talk privately?" I considered refusing, but curiosity won out. We stepped into a quiet corner of the ballroom. "You've made your point," he said. "You've humiliated Mother thoroughly. What more do you want?" I laughed softly. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about humiliation. It's about truth. For 3 years, your mother has tried to destroy my reputation, all while unknowingly praising my work. I'm just finally taking credit for what's mine. The merger announcement has already affected our family's standing." "Your family's standing?" I interrupted. "What about my livelihood? The contracts your mother cost me? The lies she spread?" He had the grace to look ashamed. I should have stopped her. "Yes, you should have. But you didn't, and now here we are." I gestured to the room where guests were enthusiastically enjoying my food. "I've built something remarkable, William, with or without the Wellington name." The evening continued, a masterclass in elegant revenge. Each course revealed another Milano's favorite, each presentation more spectacular than the last. Margaret was forced to watch as guest after guest praised the chef she'd spent years denigrating. The final blow came during dessert. as my team served my signature tiramisu, the same one Margaret had once declared the height of culinary sophistication. I clinked my glass for attention. "I want to thank the Wellington Family Foundation for this opportunity," I announced to the room. "In honor of tonight's event, the Chen Restaurant Group will be donating all proceeds from this evening to culinary education scholarships for underprivileged youth." The applause was thunderous. Margaret looked like she swallowed something sour. After all, what could be worse than her nemesis receiving a standing ovation at her own gala? Later that night, as the last guest departed, I found William waiting by the kitchen. "You know," he said quietly, "I always wondered why you chose restaurants over our life together." It wasn't about the restaurants, William. It was about being seen for who I am, not just who I married. I started to walk past him, then paused. "Your mother's sauce that you love so much, it's on the menu at my new bistro downtown. Feel free to stop by, if you can handle knowing who really makes it." 6 months later, the Chen Restaurant Group had become the talk of the Pacific Northwest culinary scene. Margaret had quietly stepped back from her social obligations, citing health concerns. My catering company was now the most sought-after service in Seattle. And William? He became a regular at my new bistro, always ordering the sauce he grew up loving. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about forcing them to face the truth they've been denying all along. As for me, I finally had everything I'd worked for: success, respect, and the satisfaction of knowing that every time Margaret Wellington craved her favorite restaurant's food, she'd have to swallow her pride along with it. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in the revenge itself. It's in the quiet moments afterward, when your enemies realize they've been wrong about you all along.